Time now to take a look at the Sunday papers. Here with me to review them this morning are the journalist and broadcaster Thomas Copeland and the entrepreneur Kate Hardcastle. So a very good morning to both of you. Good to see you both. And we're going to kick off with, a lot of the front pages actually are devoted to the coronation, aren't they, today? And we're kicking off with the Mail on Sunday, Thomas, aren't we? And they say it all in their headline. We're all invited to swear our allegiance to the King. This is the news that we're all being asked to make this pledge at home.
That's right. So this is leading on a few of the front pages today, actually. Basically, it's one of the big changes that folks are expecting to see in Charles's coronation as compared to that of his mother's. It's quite interesting from a historical perspective, actually. In previous coronations, there's this been a thing called the homage of the peers, which is when members of the aristocracy get up, they line up and they pledge allegiance to the king. Instead, in this coronation, that will just be William, and we'll have this thing called the homage of the people. The idea is that the Archbishop of Canterbury leads a pledge of allegiance, and people around the UK, if they want to, and the rest of the Commonwealth, but 150 million people total there, can decide to pledge their allegiance to the King if they want to do so. That's confirmed by Lambeth Palace as of last night. Experts at the Mail have said they call it hugely exciting, and I'll need to take their word for it. It's one of sort of a number of changes that you're seeing in this coronation, a clear attempt to make the coronation look a little bit more like modern Britain. Some of the other ones that might interest folks very quickly are there's going to be verses, and part of the service will be conducted in Welsh, a little bit on Irish, a little bit in Scots Gaelic, and in line with a very long history that the King has had in multi-faith outreach, there will be representatives and quite a clear role for religious leaders from loads of different faiths across Britain. So, an attempt to try to make the coronation, I suppose, feel like one of the reasons that a lot of people do like the royal family, like they like the tradition and they like the pomp and circumstance, but also to make it feel a little bit more modern and up to date.
Will you be saying the pledge, Thomas, do you think?
I don't know. I think people need to have a think through what they want to do themselves. Obviously, the royal family comes with a lot of baggage, and I come from Northern Ireland, and that's a complicated story there as well. So actually, I think that part of it, in some ways, is going to be, and there will be questions about this. How many people around the rest of the Commonwealth, in particular, for example, say to themselves, "This is not something I'm comfortable anymore," or maybe the idea of pledging allegiance is different from having a constitutional support for the royal family. These are all questions that Charles is going to grapple with over the course of his reign and probably into the future. And this is the beginning of that conversation, I suppose.
Yeah, what's your feeling, Kate? Because this story makes the front page of the Sunday Times as well, and they focus on the pledge, despite, as Thomas was saying, quite a few bits of news coming out about changes to the service. What's your take on it? Do you think that there will be a lot of people that will say this? I think it's just a few lines long, isn't it? The pledge that people are being asked to say at home if they want to.
Well, look, we're a week to go, and I think this event is certainly seen by many as something that can create great unity. And we've just heard there in terms of the multi-faith, multi-language approach, which is very much an outward-in approach. You very much feel that people are trying to reach out into all communities, bring them in together at a time where this country definitely does need more harmony. So I think there are stories that come out today that are very interesting. I think people will be intrigued to read about how that's been happening. And certainly on the front of the Express, it talks about Charles actually wanting to say that he's going to serve us. It's very much going to be his service to us, rather our service to him. I think pledging allegiance, the first thing that comes to mind for many of us is probably that American school morning, actually. I thought of School of Rock straight away, pledging allegiance to Mrs. Kneebly. But I think many people, it's not common parlour, is it, really? That's the first thing. What does it mean? What am I being asked to do? And I think that will be the debate around breakfast tables. So I hope it doesn't create division when many are expecting it will create unity.
Yeah, and Lambeth Palace have called it a joyful and solemn and joyful moment, and basically talking about being a great cry in support of the King, this pledge. And the overarching theme, they say, is called to serve, as you say. Front page of the Sunday Mirror, meanwhile, Thomas, focuses on the costs that they say are kind of notching up of the coronation amid a lot of security, which I guess is inevitable.
That's right. So the Mirror calling this an exclusive this morning. They say the total cost of the coronation prepare yourselves for a pun, will be in the realm of 250 million, and 150 million of that will be down to security costs. They've done some of the maths, and actually it works out that the Queen's coronation back in 56 cost the equivalent of about 47 million in today's money, but the security operation is the thing that really seems to cost a lot of money these days. Concerns about sort of, I suppose, classic concerns when you have big events like this in a major city like London about terrorism, but also sort of disruption from the likes of, Just Stop Oil and these other kind of protest groups. And you've got diplomats, you've got politicians, you've got celebrities coming from around the world. Add all on top of that this will be a hugely watched event around the globe. And it's highly embarrassing if things go wrong in the UK. So that all comes with a price tag. I suppose it does lead into this awkward conversation that people have about a very, very expensive event and lavish taking place at a time when lots of people are struggling to get by, and the bean counters are always out trying to measure up, exactly how much things cost and what the royal family bring in and what about taxes and all this. And that leads into that conversation. But actually, there's less of that than I might have expected there to have been. This is, a story in the Mirror, and actually doesn't really lay into the overall cost that much, especially when you consider, the last coronation was so many decades ago. These are not a common event, and in many ways can be used as a good way to get Britain onto the global stage, to get all eyes on London. It probably will be good for tourism. Plenty of people, certainly I know from where I am in the moment in America, will be watching, if not maybe travelling over to catch some of the festivities in London themselves.
Yeah, interesting. And interesting to see how what the public reaction is as well to the costs and how that bill is being paid. But take us to the Sun on Sunday, Kate, because they're focusing on Prince Harry, and they're saying that he's just dipping in and out for the coronation. He's not hanging around.
And who can blame him, really? It's a shame that we've got the story that many of us are perhaps not wanting to see in our papers anymore. We feel it's overdone, and it's a family rift that actually is incredibly public, understandably so, but just seems to have run on and on. Both sides of the Atlantic, actually. I see that Thomas is in New York. I work out there regularly, and it's certainly something that's heightened in terms of conversation, because obviously Harry and Meghan are based over there. But this is a story that Harry will be in and out of the coronation. It suggests 24 hours turnaround, just enough to be there for formalities, and then he will be on his way back home. And as I say, understandably so, it will keep the attention minimised and perhaps back focused on the main event.
Yeah, and there will still be plenty of focus, won't they? Everyone will be watching where he's sitting, who he interacts with, what his expression is like. I'm sure he'll get plenty of coverage in his short time in the country, no doubt. But let's turn away from the coronation for now. We've got a week of build-up to it. The Observer is going with a very different story. They've got their own interview with Sir Keir Starmer. And Thomas, what's the main thrust? The headline they've gone with is that he's going to really push hard on public sector reform.
Yeah, that's right. I suppose as a consequence of the coronation, the UK local elections haven't got as much attention as maybe they deserve. They're coming up on Thursday. The first big test for Starmer and Sunak post the time when it felt like everything changed, which was really Liz Truss's premiership, short-lived as it was. That really changed the landscape, and this will be the first big test afterwards. As ever, though, sort of shy on the details. So Starmer says that he wants to go further than Blair in terms of public services, pledging a radical and reforming and bold Labour government, but not really too many policy details in there. The one major one that's in there is about that we get some specifics on is housing policy. He wants to reintroduce targets for the private sector to build at least 300,000 per year, giving more power to local councils, which always comes with pros and cons, and then giving first-time buyers dibs on new builds rather than overseas buyers. So a little bit of work on housing policy, and actually it looks like housing policy is going to be a really big part of the next election, particularly in my view amongst younger voters who feel as if they're locked out of the housing market at the moment. But we're told in the article that Starmer is expected to explain more about his policy agenda in speeches over the next couple of weeks. Why over the next couple of weeks, I don't know. When the elections are on Thursday, leave that up to Starmer to explain why. But I mean, the polls have certainly been going in the Labour Party's favour for an extended period of time now. They're starting to stall a little bit, and it's probably the case that the Keir Starmer, you can't make it to number 10 on the basis of not being the other party. He won't win supportive voters on account of not being a Conservative, and therefore I think he and the party are going to need to just explain more about what exactly they want a Labour government going to be. Radical is a good word, bold is a good word, reforming is a good word, but nobody actually knows what any of that means, in policy detail. And I think that's where
one line that comes out here is that he does say there's going to be a greater focus on prevention. That's one of the things, but as you say, not much detail on that as far as the article is concerned. Very briefly, Kate, we've got a very short amount of time, but the front page of the Sunday Telegraph, sorry, Kate, DeSantis supporting, Kemi Badenoch. We haven't got enough time. There's the front page for people to look at, Kate. Maybe we'll revisit in an hour's time. I'm not going to put you under that pressure. But thank you both very much indeed, and we'll see you in the next hour. Thank you. Do stay with us, lots coming up, including a bank holiday strike by nurses in England begins tonight. We'll have all the details.